Right now, open your brokerage app. Look at your portfolio. Look at the shares of Apple or Tesla, or the government bonds you have spent decades accumulating. You see the numbers. You see the green line going up. You see your name at the top of the account. You believe you own those assets. You believe that if the world burns down tomorrow, that property is yours, protected by law, protected by the Constitution of your country. This is the single greatest lie in modern financial history. You do not own those stocks. You do not own those bonds. What you own is a security entitlement. You own a digital promise. You own a claim on a claim on a claim. And the terrifying reality is that the true owner, the entity that holds the legal title while you hold the empty receipt, has built a mechanism to take it all back. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It is encoded in the Uniform Commercial Code. It is buried in the fine print of every brokerage agreement you never read. And at the heart of this global dragnet is a 9-digit alphanumeric code that you see every day but never question. The CUSIP number. Most people think a CUSIP number is just a filing tag, a boring administrative identifier like a Dewey Decimal number in a library. It is not. The CUSIP is the digital leash. It is the barcode on the back of the beast. It is the mechanism that allows the global financial system to identify, locate, and legally confiscate your wealth regardless of which border you are hiding behind. We are moving toward a synchronized global debt restructuring. They call it the Great Reset. I call it the Great Taking. And the trap has already been set. The cage is built. You are just waiting for them to close the door. So, before we expose exactly how this mechanism works, I need to ask you a question that matters more today than at any point in your life. Where are you watching from? Because if you think your geography protects you from this American-made dragnet, you are the first person who is going to lose everything.
To understand how they are going to take your money, you have to understand how they tricked you into giving them the title to your property. It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, methodical erosion of property rights that started over 50 years ago. Go back to the 1960s. This was the era of the paper crunch. Back then, if you bought a share of General Motors, you received a physical piece of paper, a certificate. It had your name on it. You could put it in a safe at home. You could put it in a bank deposit box. If the brokerage firm went bankrupt, it didn't matter. You held the paper. You held the property rights. The asset was yours. But as trading volume exploded in the late 60s, Wall Street couldn't keep up. The physical movement of millions of paper certificates became a logistical nightmare. The back offices were drowning. The market actually had to close on Wednesdays just to let the clerks catch up with the paperwork. Wall Street demanded a solution. They demanded efficiency. And whenever the financial elite demand efficiency, the public usually pays for it with their freedom. The solution they invented was immobilization. They decided that moving paper was too slow, so they created a central depository, a massive vault. They said, let's put all the paper certificates in one place, and we will just trade the rights to them electronically. It sounded convenient. It sounded modern. Sound familiar? Just like today, they sell us central bank digital currencies as convenient and instant, while hiding the fact that they are surveillance tools. Back then, they sold immobilization as efficiency, while hiding the fact that it was the greatest theft of property rights in history. So they created the Depository Trust Company, or the DTC. Later, this evolved into the DTCC. Here is the trick. When the certificates were moved into this central vault, the legal ownership structure changed. To make the electronic trading work, the system required a nominee, a central entity that would technically own everything, so the ledger could be updated without moving the paper. They created an entity called Cede Co, spelled CEDE. When you buy a stock today, you are not the owner. Cede Co is the owner. Your broker is not the owner. Your broker has a contractual claim against Cede Co. And you are at the bottom of the food chain. You have a contractual claim against your broker. You are a beneficial owner. That sounds nice, doesn't it? Beneficial. It sounds like you are getting a benefit. But in legal terms, a beneficial owner is a person who enjoys the benefits of ownership, even though the title is in another name. And here is the dark parallel. In the 1930s, when the U.S. government confiscated gold, they couldn't take the gold you had buried in your backyard easily. They had to threaten you with jail time to make you turn it in. Physical possession was 9/10 of the law. But today, because of immobilization, you don't possess anything. The system was designed so that in the event of a catastrophic collapse, the kind of collapse we are staring at right now in 2024 and beyond, the collateral, which is your stock portfolio, belongs to the secured creditors of the system, not to you. They shifted you from a property owner to an unsecured creditor. Sound familiar? It's the same logic banks use with your cash deposits. Once you deposit money in a bank, it is no longer your money. It is the bank's money, and you are an unsecured creditor of the bank. If the bank fails, you get in line.
But people didn't realize they did the exact same thing to the stock market. They just needed a way to track every single asset globally to ensure that when the time came, nothing could slip through the cracks. That is where the CUSIP comes in. Sound familiar? Just like a cattle rancher needs to brand every single cow to manage the herd, the financial elite needed a universal branding iron for every bond, every stock, every municipal security. Enter the Committee on Uniform Security Identification Procedures, CUSIP, created in 1964, implemented fully in the late 60s alongside the immobilization process. A 9-character code. The first 6 characters identify the issuer, the company or municipality. The next 2 identify the specific issue, equity or debt. The final digit is a check digit. It looks innocent. It looks like logistics. But this code is the backbone of the global asset Dragnet. The CUSIP system is owned by the American Bankers Association and operated by S&P Global Market Intelligence. Think about that combination, the biggest banks and the biggest data firm. This code connects your asset to the central depository, It is the digital thread that ties your wealth to the jurisdiction of the United States, regardless of where you are. You could be a German citizen, sitting in Munich, buying shares of Microsoft through a German broker. You think you are protected by German laws. You think your assets are in Europe. But that share of Microsoft has a CUSIP. That CUSIP leads back to the DTCC in New York. That asset is legally domiciled in the United States. If the U.S. government imposes sanctions, or if the systemic risk becomes too high and they declare a national emergency regarding the financial markets, that CUSIP is the switch they flip. They don't need to send agents to your house. They don't need to seize your computer. They simply tell the central ledger, freeze CUSIP X, Y, and Z associated with these accounts. And instantly, your net worth goes to zero. You can look at the screen. You can see the numbers. But you cannot sell. You cannot transfer. You cannot withdraw. You hold the receipt. They hold the title. But the receipt is wilder than you think. Because the legal framework they built to justify this theft is so complex, so boring, and so dry that almost no one noticed when they changed the law in all 50 states to make this legal. This brings us to the core mechanism of the theft, the smoking gun. It's called the Uniform Commercial Code, Article 8, specifically the revision of 1994. Most people fall asleep when they hear Uniform Commercial Code. That is by design. If they called it the Asset Confiscation Act, you would be rioting in the streets. So they called it UCC Article 8. Before 1994, the law was muddy regarding who owned what in this digital depository system. So, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, along with major financial institutions, pushed for a revision of the law in all 50 states. They introduced a new legal concept, security entitlement. Remember that phrase. Memorize it. Write it down. Security entitlement. This law explicitly states that when you hold securities through an intermediary, like Robinhood or Schwab or Vanguard, you do not have a property right to the specific share. You have a pro rata share of a pool of assets held by the intermediary. Why does this matter? Because of what happens during a crash. Let's look at the numbers. The derivatives market, the casino where the big banks bet on interest rates and currency fluctuations, is estimated at over $1 quadrillion in notional value. That is a 1 followed by 15 zeros. The total GDP of the entire world is only about 100 trillion. The derivatives bubble is 10 times larger than the entire global economy. When this bubble pops, and it is wobbling right now as interest rates stay higher for longer, the big banks, the systemically important financial institutions, will face losses that exceed all the money in existence. Who pays for that? In the old days, the bank would go bust, but under the current legal framework established by the 1994 UCC revisions and the 2005 Bankruptcy Abuse Prevention and Consumer Protection Act, there is a safe harbor for these big banks.
This is the super priority status. Here is the nightmare scenario. This is how the Dragnet catches you. A major bank fails. Let's call it Bank X. Bank X holds the derivative contracts. They are on the losing side of a massive bet. They owe trillions. They don't have the cash, so they look at their collateral. But wait, they don't just use their own assets as collateral. Through rehypothecation, the system allows the pooling of client assets. Your assets, your stocks, identified by their CUSIPs, are sitting in the pool at the DTCC. Under the law, the secured creditors, the other big banks that Bank X owes money to, have priority over you. You are an unsecured creditor. This means that in a solvency crisis, the secured creditors can legally reach into the pool of client assets and take the collateral to settle the debts of the failed bank. They can take your Apple stock. They can take your treasuries. And here is the kicker. It is not considered stealing. It is considered enforcing a security interest. The law was written to ensure that the derivatives market does not implode. To save the casino, they legalized the confiscation of the chips from the players' pockets. And the CUSIP is the tracking mechanism that ensures every chip is accounted for. Look at the statistics of ownership. Today, over 99% of all publicly traded securities are held in street name. That means they are held in the name of Cede Co. Only a microscopic fraction of investors actually hold direct registration shares, shares registered in their own name on the books of the company. 99% of the market is vulnerable to this dragnet. The trap is global. The U.S. exports this legal framework. Through the Hague Securities Convention, the U.S. pushed to harmonize global laws to match Article 8 of the UCC. They want the whole world to play by these rules. Why? Because the U.S. dollar is the world reserve currency, and U.S. Treasury bonds are the world reserve asset. The U.S. financial system is the black hole at the center of the galaxy. If you are a European investor and you buy a U.S. ETF, you are caught in the CUSIP dragnet. If you are an Asian pension fund buying U.S. corporate debt, you are caught in the CUSIP dragnet. Even if you buy assets in your own country, if your country's central depository has links to the international custodians like Euroclear or Clearstream, guess who those custodians have links to? The U.S. banking system. It is a pyramid. At the top is the Bank for International Settlements. Below them, the central banks. Below them, the systemically important banks, JP Morgan, Goldman, etc. Below them, the DTCC and Cede Co. Below them, your broker. And at the very bottom, crushed under the weight of the entire structure, is you, the security entitlement holder. The CUSIP number on your statement is not your property ID. It is the inventory tag for the people above you. We saw a dry run of this in Canada recently. During the trucker protests, the government invoked the Emergencies Act. They didn't just freeze bank accounts. They froze investment accounts. They froze insurance policies. How did they do it so fast? Digital identification, centralized ledgers. They identified the targets, and because the targets were merely beneficial owners and not holding physical assets outside the system, the government could instruct the intermediaries to lock the doors. Now imagine that on a global scale. Imagine a sovereign debt crisis where the U.S. government needs to force a bail-in. We aren't talking about 2008, where they printed money to bail out the banks. That caused inflation. The next crisis will be too big to print. If they print $50 trillion, the dollar dies instantly. So, they won't bail out. They will bail in. A bail-in means the recapitalization of failed banks using the assets of creditors and depositors. And remember, thanks to UCC Article 8, if you hold stocks in a brokerage account,
You are a creditor. Your assets are their equity. This is the great taking. They will say it is for financial stability. They will say it is to save the system. They will say it is for the greater good. They will halt trading. They will lock the CUSIPs. And when the markets reopen, perhaps weeks later, your account might show a balance, but it might be in a new digital currency. Or your stocks might be gone, replaced by bank equity certificates that are worthless. Or, in the worst-case scenario described by experts analyzing the great taking theory, the secured creditors will simply sweep the collateral. The DTCC computers will process the transfer of ownership from the pool of beneficial owners to the secured creditors. And because it is all automated, because it is all digital, because it is all based on CUSIPs and electronic entries, it will happen at the speed of light. You won't have time to call your broker. Your broker won't even answer the phone because they will be bankrupt.
This is the reality of the dematerialized financial system. They sold us convenience. They took away our property rights. They told us physical certificates were dangerous because they could be lost or stolen. But the irony is, by centralizing everything, they made it possible for everything to be stolen at once. So, what happens next? We are approaching 2026. Why is this date important? Because the cycle of interest rate lag effects is hitting the economy now. The commercial real estate sector is imploding. The bond markets are volatile. The debt ceilings are being smashed. The liquidity crunch is coming. And when liquidity dries up, collateral becomes king. The big banks are hoarding collateral. They are preparing for the sweep. If you are sitting there in denial thinking the government wouldn't do that, it would destroy faith in the markets, you are missing the point. They don't care about faith in the old markets if they are introducing a new system. If the goal is to move to a central bank digital currency system, destroying the old asset classes and wiping out the middle class's independence is not a bug, it's a feature. It makes everyone dependent on the new state handouts. If you have no stocks, no bonds, and no savings because they were bailed in to save the economy, you have no choice but to accept the universal basic income paid in the new digital token. The CUSIP Dragnet is the mechanism of the transition. It is the bridge from the dying world of free market capitalism to the new world of techno-feudalism. In this new world, you own nothing, not even your dissent. So, what is the counter-move? If the CUSIP and the security entitlement are the traps, you must step outside of their jurisdiction. This is why you hear people talking about direct registration, DRS. When you directly register shares in your own name, you remove them from Cede Co. You remove them from the DTCC. You become the legal owner on the company's books. It makes the asset harder to trade instantly, yes, but it makes it harder to confiscate instantly. This is why you hear people talking about physical gold and silver. No CUSIP, no counterparty risk, no electricity required. This is why you hear people talking about Bitcoin held in self-custody, not on an exchange, not in ETF. An ETF
is just another CUSIP. An ETF is just another claim on a claim. If you buy a Bitcoin ETF, you are just entering the same slaughterhouse through a different door. Real ownership means no counterparty. Real ownership means you hold the keys, you hold the metal, you hold the deed. The system relies on your laziness. It relies on your assumption that someone else is looking out for you. The SEC is not looking out for you. The DTCC is not looking out for you. They are looking out for the integrity of the market, which is code for the survival of the banks. The warning lights are flashing red. The CUSIP system is active. The legal framework is in place. The derivatives bubble is shaking. You have to decide. Do you want to be a beneficial owner waiting for the benefits to run out? Or do you want to be a sovereign individual? The receipt is not the money. The map is not the territory. And the digital entry in your brokerage app is not your wealth. It is an illusion, and illusions vanish when the lights go out. Subscribe for the unfiltered truth, because in a world of universal deceit, knowing how the machine works is the only way to keep your hand on the off switch. I'll see you on the other side.